Hamas doesn't comply with something that was never actually asked of them in the first place. He's declared that he will carry out ethnic cleansing in Gaza, but yet it seems that the Taoiseach is determined to go come hell or high water. I think the other issue that we're going to be raising is a clear signalling that we're seeing from this government of a further move to the right, particularly in relation to housing and cost of living measures. So the veil has been lifted and this nasty Thatcherite bent is being revealed. So not on behalf of tenants, not because the rent pressure zones aren't working, but on behalf of international investors. Micheál Martin has said that he will review rent pressure zones. Also, I think very cynically, he has talked about opening up the market even more for private housing. That is not something that was ever signalled in the general election. It is not, in fact, quite the opposite. The impression was given that more public housing was needed, and in fact, the Fianna Fáil gave that we're better at Fine Gael on building public housing and we're going to do more of it, and now they're actually saying they will do more to entice the private sector. This is a disaster for so many of the people that we're in touch with on a daily basis, who are being evicted, who are having rent increases and who are sitting on council housing lists for anything from 11 to 16 years. And in particular, I want to highlight in my own constituency, where it's one of the epicentres of the housing crisis for a decade, we have a land bank sitting there undeveloped that could build 7,000 housing units, plus schools, plus parks, and plus other infrastructure. I'll be demanding that this actually has investment to develop those land banks, not the other way around. And I think this nasty Thatcherite streak of dropping the cost of living measures that so many working families have been relying on is very, very serious. The last issue I'll just mention is I think Fine Gael have questions to answer about why they selected a senator to run in 2 elections, despite being found to have carried out misconduct, sexual misconduct, at a Fine Gael or at an event, and why they reappointed him. They certainly waxed lyrical and used the very serious issue of gender-based violence against other political parties, but I want to find out what the safeguarding policies of all these parties are. It's very unusual to have a fine system of 10,000 against somebody. And I would also like to hear what they're going to do now on this serious issue of the epidemic of gender-based violence, rather than just using it as a point-scoring issue.
Fine Gael said they didn't reappoint him, that the last time he was elected here 2 weeks ago, he was actually nominated by an outside body and there was nothing that they could actually do about it. Do you think that argument holds water?
It doesn't hold any water. He's a Fine Gael member, he's a Fine Gael senator, he speaks on behalf of the government in political debates in the media. Many, many times he's a regular feature on panels, on TV shows on behalf of the government. It doesn't hold any water at all. I'd like to hear more about their safeguarding policies, and I think journalists should be asking questions about that.
Can I ask you about the tweet I saw you commenting on that case with the Guardian Wicklow and the character references of the superintendent? Do you want to expand a bit on your concerns there?
Yeah, and I'm going to be raising it in promised legislation today. So how come we can have a situation where a Gardaí who on the job sexually assaults a woman, falsely imprisons her? Remember that charge was used in Jobestown, for example, with a life imprisonment sentence. While he's on the job, while she's come to the station for help, his wife can testify in the court on his behalf, and 35 references can be written to say what a great person he is, including one from a superintendent. How you could argue he's a great Gardaí when he clearly broke every single rule in relation to safeguarding and committing crime. So I think one thing is clear. First of all, the new act wasn't enacted in that case, whereby every single person who writes a character reference is meant to be cross-examined. That didn't happen. I'd like to know why. But also, these should be eliminated completely in all cases of gender-based and sexual violence. They're used as a way of undermining the complainant and, making out the defendant to be a great person, and they're used in a misogynistic way as well.
That
Well, there was an outcry in Natasha O'Brien's case when, somebody who was higher up made a statement on behalf of that soldier. So why are the Gardaí doing it, and how many of the other references were from Gardaí as well, or who were they from? It's an absolute outrage, and it's been greeted in a very just cynical way by women and by others. We're already having the whole issue of counselling notes in court, and now we're having character references being used against victims as well.
This question for Paul or Richard, maybe. Former Junior Sports Minister Brendan Griffin today announced that he'd joined Hanover Communications as a senior public affairs consultant. Do you think any TD who leaves Leinster House should be allowed unfettered access to the complex? Should they be allowed to become lobbyists and walk in and out of here without declaring it?
No. So I think there is a very, very big problem whereby people who are TDs or senators can lose their seat or not stand for re-election, go through a revolving door and reinvent themselves as lobbyists for corporations, for developers, for data centres or something else. And not only that, but then continue to use their access in this place. So they can drive through that front door, they can go for lunch in the canteen, they can go for lunch in the members' restaurant, they can go into the members' bar, and they can effectively use the access that they have as a result of their formerly elected position to engage in corporate lobbying. I think once there needs to be a proper cool-off period between the time of people being TDs and people being lobbyists, and that needs to be enforced. But then once people become lobbyists, then effectively they should no longer be treated as former public representatives while they are in that role. So the special privilege access that they get should be cut off. Otherwise it has a deeply corrosive effect, because you have people who have a mind on what their future jobs may be when they're engaged in their job in terms of policy. The obvious example of that was the Fianna Fáil Junior Minister Michael Darcy, who was poacher turned gamekeeper. He was involved in regulations in terms of the financial sector, and then he ended up going to be a lobbyist for them. Just the other point I want to make quickly and hand over to Richard is in relation to...
Take your time.
Thank you, Richard. How long have you just got? In relation to what is an assault on what is left of neutrality. It was revealed on Thursday night, Friday night, that effectively the government has their heads of bill written to amend or get rid of the triple lock. The government attempt to paint this up and say this is not about neutrality, this is about something else entirely. It's about not giving countries a veto on how we act, and actually we're in favour of neutrality. That is not the truth. Micheál Martin was telling the truth in 2013 when he said the triple lock is at the very core of our neutrality, when he described the attempts to get rid of the triple lock as an out-of-touch ideological obsession by Fine Gael. That is an obsession that has now been taken on with gusto by Micheál Martin. He's now even more obsessed about it than Fine Gael is, and it absolutely is about dismantling what is left of our triple lock, of our neutrality. So the last government launched an assault on neutrality, in particular in the aftermath of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, because they thought this was the moment to go for it. They all had statements about the need to rethink what it means to be neutral, to reconsider our neutrality and so on, and they got massive pushback from the public. They haven't given up on that strategy, they just reframed it and renamed it. And effectively what they've done now is just empty the word of neutrality of any content whatsoever. So literally under their definition of neutrality, Ireland could send troops to be part of an occupying force in Iraq, and as long as we don't join NATO, we're still officially neutral. If you listen to what they actually say, that they define neutrality as simply not joining a military alliance, nothing else about it. And a few important questions need to be asked of the government. One, where do they want to send troops that they cannot currently send troops? They need to be honest with people. If they want to send troops somewhere, or wanted to over the past couple of decades or whatever, where is it that you wanted to send troops? Secondly, they need to be challenged on this false assertion that this is about giving, that currently the Security Council powers have a veto over our deployment of foreign troops. That is not true. I mean, it was a Fianna Fáil government, I think, in 2006 that brought in the Defence Amendment Act, which explicitly changed, which used the example that they now use of Macedonia, and changed the triple lock, changed the third element to say that it wasn't just the Security Council, it was also a resolution of the UN General Assembly. The truth is, this is about freeing the hands of the government to align with NATO, to send troops on NATO-led missions. We know that at the time of the invasion of Iraq, while we were all marching against that war, and with the support of the vast majority of the public, that the then Fianna Fáil government allowed US troops to use Shannon Airport. If it wasn't for the triple lock, they could have sent Irish troops to participate in that invasion and that occupation. So that's why we absolutely have to resist, and we're going to be beating the drum very, very loud to resist the drive to militarism, to undermine what is left of neutrality.
Yeah, I know you're cold, so I'll be quick. First of all, I just want to say that the interview by Micheál Martin at the weekend in relation to the housing crisis in this country really is an instance of the mask slipping from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to expose why we have a housing crisis. They have pretended for some time they were interested in addressing the market failure of the private sector and delivering social and affordable housing, and what we see now that was just a lie they were telling the Irish public, and given the first opportunity with this new, more right-wing government, they're exposing what their real agenda is, which is to allow the profiteers to gain even more control over the housing sector. I mean, to me, the most telling statement in the whole thing is when he says the government are going to pivot more towards private investors. Now, to be honest, it would be very difficult to pivot more towards private investors than Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have done, when 90% of apartments last year were purchased by institutional investors. Now, some of that was AHBs, but a lot of it are vulture funds, big international investors, and 60% of houses were bought by institutional investors. So they are proposing a complete corporate takeover of the housing sector, when it is exactly the involvement of for-profit investors that has created the housing crisis in the first place. So they're going to make a bad situation worse and drive already unaffordable rents and house prices even further up, to the benefit of private investors, while the human misery of the housing crisis is getting exponentially worse. So we are facing an absolute disastrous situation. I mean, to put it in very simple terms, the private investors don't want to solve the housing crisis, because why would they possibly want to get supply up to a point where rents and house prices would fall? They have no interest in that. They will never do it. They are manipulating the land banks, they're manipulating the market in order to keep house prices and rents up. And this government is now planning to hand the housing sector lock, stock and barrel over to the people who actually have caused the housing crisis and have an interest in maintaining the housing crisis. Second thing I just want to raise briefly is, after this, we will be going, myself, I think all of us, or some of us anyway, are going over to the picket lines of the British and Irish Modern Music Institute, where a savage attack has been launched on the lecturers and staff in that institution, that third level institution, where 53 of 135 lecturing staff are being laid off, and where they plan to create a new yellow pack casualised lecturer grade, which is starting a very serious race to the bottom, which is going to impact on all third level teaching staff and lecturers if they get away with it, because they're going to create a new grade where people are completely casualised and where they are paid far less than their counterparts in most of the third level sector. And what's outrageous about this is, although this is a private college, the people who apply to it believe they are applying to the TU Dublin, which is funded by the HEA to provide this course, and yet they are doing this to the staff. So we believe James Lawless, the new Minister for Higher Education, needs to intervene as a matter of urgency. They can't wash their hands of this and stop this attack on the conditions of employment and pay of lecturers in BIM, not just for the people directly involved in this dispute, but also because it is going to impact on all of those in the higher lecturers and teachers in third level and higher education. It's an absolute outrageous attack, and it should be resisted, and we're going to be doing everything we can to support them. There will be a topical issue debate on the issue tonight in the Dáil that both myself and Ruth will be speaking up on behalf of the workers in BIM.